All right, the webinar has started. Welcome, friends. We'll get started here shortly. Give some time for us together today. All right, once again, we're welcoming some folks in, so we'll get started in a minute or two. Welcome, friends. My name is Paul Yoder. I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Graduate Teacher Education at Eastern Mennonite University. I'm based here in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And during today's webinar, I look forward to hearing from two colleagues. So I want to invite our presenters to go ahead and turn your screens on, and I will start with some introductions today. So just a few doors down the hallway from where I'm sitting is my colleague, Dr. Barbara Wheatley. So I know Barbara very well, but it's fun to read a little bit of her bio, because there's things that we don't talk about every week that she's involved in. And so Barbara is an assistant professor of teacher education here at EMU. She specializes in literacy for all learners. She teaches literacy courses for elementary and secondary, pre-service and in-service teachers across our grad and undergrad programs. Additionally, Barbara teaches children's literature, young adult literature, and instructional technology and assessment courses. Prior to coming to EMU, Dr. Wheatley was an elementary school teacher, a reading specialist, and a library media specialist who brings over 25 years of experience. So thank you, Barbara, for your preparation in planning for today and for expanding our learning community by inviting your colleague, Michelle Creamer. Dr. Michelle Creamer is Assistant Professor of Educational Curriculum and Instruction at University of Louisiana Lafayette. I think I'm saying that wrong according to how the folks in Louisiana say it, but Dr. Creamer is an assistant professor. She, prior to this, was a high school English language arts teacher. She serves as site director for the National Writing Project of Acadiana and enjoys engaging with students and teachers to support writing and writing instruction. I love that distinction, writing and writing instruction. Look forward to hearing more about that in this hour. In this role, she works with students, teachers, and community members through various writing events and initiatives. Though most of her writing is currently academic, which makes sense given the titles that we share, she's continually inspired by the written word and believes everyone is a writer. So thank you to Barbara and to Michelle for leading us today. I'll go ahead and throw it over to you and let me know if we have any supports or questions along the way, but the time is yours.
Thank you, Paul. I think Michelle's going to get our screen up, ready to go. She's got it going. There we go. And as Paul said, I am Barbara Wheatley right here from EMU. We're going to be talking to you today about exploring the writing continuum and supporting our elementary educators as teachers of writing. And there's our wonderful pictures. I'm Barbara Wheatley and
Michelle Creamer. And we're going to go ahead and start off with a little writing exercise. So this is something that is very much part of the National Writing Project, as well as the site that I'm director of, the National Writing Project of Acadiana. So we're going to start off with a little writing exercise called 6-word stories. We're going to watch about a minute of this video. I'm not going to have the audio on. There's no audio that you need for it. And it does give you a little bit of background, but I'm curious to know if anybody has heard of 6-word stories or not. We're going to get a chance to share. We might ask some folks if they're willing to unmute themselves and share, or maybe drop their 6-word story in the chat. But I think the best way to show what a 6-word story is to just watch this video for a minute, and we're going to get a little bit of that background. And so we see that this came from Hemingway, supposedly. But it's become a very popular trend. And so you're going to see all these examples of some really neat 6-word stories. And so something I think as you're reading these and watching these examples, I think it's important for you to realize 2 things. One, you can play with punctuation. You can, have some interesting things to be able to kind of stretch those 6 words, but it has to be 6 words. And also it needs to be a full story. We're not just having 6 random words or descriptors of some sort, but we are telling a full story. And so I'm going to go ahead and pause it right there because I think you've gotten the gist of 6-word stories. And then we're going to go ahead to the next slide, and I'm going to ask you to free write for a few minutes. And I'm going to set the timer on my phone so it'll go off and be loud when that time is up. But what I'm going to ask you to do is just free write about a story, a memory, or an experience that has been a defining moment in your life. And this could include your teacher life, but it doesn't have to. So something that's been defining and impactful. I'm going to give you about 2.5 minutes. Barb and I are going to be writing with you all. This is not the part we're asking you to share. So this writing is just for you. Okay, so I'll start that timer. Okay, we have about another 30 seconds or so if you want to get to a point of wrapping up. Okay, so that sound means that our time is up. Hopefully you've had some time to get a memory or a story, something impactful down. And now I challenge you to write 2 different 6-word stories. So the first is going to be your philosophy of teaching. So if you chose for that impactful free write, that impactful story to be something from your teacher life, maybe that'll help to inform your teaching philosophy. If not, that's okay. If you go in a totally different direction from the free write, that is more than fine. And then I also encourage you to go ahead and write a 6-word memoir. Now, that might come from your story, but it also, again, may not. But I will say that we're going to revisit the memoir at the end of our webinar today. So you're going to want to work on these 2 pieces. And we'll take about a minute for this. And then, like I said, we would absolutely love whether somebody wants to unmute themselves and share what they've written, or maybe even just drop it in the chat. That would be fantastic. But I'll go ahead and be quiet and give you a minute to think. Count your words. So I went ahead and dropped both of my 6-word stories in the chat. So for my memoir, I put checklists, the key to my productivity. I'm a very organized person. People comment on my organization often, but it definitely requires some work. But that's across all aspects of my life. I have checklists for everything. And then for my teaching philosophy, I wrote, we are all learning, be compassionate. Barb, would you like to share your one of your 6-word stories?
Yes, I just typed them in. Well, I hope they're going. Let me see. All right, so my philosophy is impressions made slowly, day after day. And then lost but never lost for good would be my memoir.
Ooh, I like that. And I'm sorry, y'all. It just I realized that I sent my stories to not the whole group, so I apologize. So I went ahead and fixed that.
Me too.
Would anybody like to share their 6-word teaching philosophy or 6-word memoir? If not, that's okay. Like I said, we are going to come back, not necessarily to the philosophy, but definitely to the memoirs. Oh, Paul, thank you so much. He says, we think, create, and learn together. All right. Is that your teaching philosophy or your memoir? It feels like it could be both. Oh, okay. Transforming do to be, but slowly. And a little rhyme in there too.
Paul, do you see anyone raising their hand, or Cara by chance?
No, I don't at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, y'all, thank you so much. We are going to go ahead. And then just one more thing before we move on. I did want to share briefly just a couple of ideas for applications of 6-word stories. So of course, this can be an opportunity for creative writing. Tell a story in 6 words. Particularly with our young students, this idea of telling a story can feel very daunting. Telling a story in 6 words can feel much more manageable. And then we can also go ahead and bring in drawing to where we're having that combination of drawing and writing. Another idea is for summary writing. So summarizing the main idea of a lesson, text, or concept in 6 words, and then reflection writing, whether that's a reaction to the today's lesson or just a reflection on how students are feeling that day, share that in 6 words. So those are just a couple of ideas that you can bring that into the classroom. And now I'm going to turn things over to Barb.
Remember to unmute. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the writing continuum and what it means for our children and our students. It's important to remember that our reading and writing skills happen at the same time, and they're developing these at the same time. And reading and writing are reciprocal. Also, we have to remember that our kids do not move from one stage to another in a clear path. And so they may one day appear to be at this stage, but because of motivation, interest, or content knowledge, they may go backwards or forwards. So it's not these set places where they move from one to the next stage. The first one we're going to talk about is emergent. And as you can see, the picture that we have shown is from one of our little kiddos. And this writing looks more like a drawing than it does for writing. And this is because children at this point have probably not reached phonological or phonemic awareness. And so therefore, they don't have that ability to connect what they're writing with what they're saying. And they can't connect the speech sounds to the written sounds. They may or may not know their letter names, and they do a lot of pretend reading and pretend writing, and they'll point and read all about it. And it may not look like that when you are looking at it as an adult. And so what this looks like, they could have scribbles on there. They could have the drawing like the first picture. They may do something that's mock linear, meaning they're actually going in a line, but it's not really letters. They have things that might look like letters, or they have what Jana has there, which is symbol salad. And this is where she's using letters of her name, but she's also throwing in some numbers like 3 and 4 along with her drawing. And to her, she's written a whole lot and has a whole lot of meaning there. But for us as adults, it's not quite what we see as normal writing. And so they tend to use a lot of the letters of their own name because that is so important to them. And that's one of the first important words that they learn. And there is a lot going on here. And it's important for us to encourage them to write and to call their drawings writing, because that's what it is for them. Then they move into becoming a beginning writer or beginning. All of a sudden, writing is so much more labor intensive. And so they slow down what they're writing. They may have had scribbles all over the page before, and now all of a sudden they only have a couple of words, because every word is difficult. It takes a lot of thought process. They're working on connecting those letters that they write to what they're saying. And so they're connecting that sound, trying to get that exact letter that they hear written down. They're constantly worrying about navigating the rules. You know, where do I start my writing? Where do I end my writing? They're trying to get a whole complete thought. And so that's why all of a sudden you see children at this stage slow down and write less, because it is a lot of work for these kids. This is also where that phonemic awareness work that we're working on in school is beginning to show up. And what you tend to see, we've got 2 examples. We've got Kamal's and we've got Sarah's writing here. A lot of times children at this stage use letter names. So when they want to write the word when, they'll write the letters Y and N, because when you say it, you hear w, which is like Y, and you hear when, and you hear that N sound at the end. So they put a YN because that's what they heard. They have very few words that they can spell automatically. They're working on writing the letter A for A and trying to figure out how to write the, which is very difficult. They're thinking about capitals and end punctuation. Kamal has really big periods because he's learning that's important in a sentence. And they might also read more than what they wrote. Kamal wrote, I make a butterfly and a rainbow. And then Sarah wrote, Sarah's turkey is beautiful, which is what she read when she read it to me, but it looks only like she wrote Sarah turkey. So she definitely read more than what she actually was able to put down on the paper. A transitional writer is kind of that bridge between a beginner and an advanced writer. All of a sudden, writing is a little easier. It's a little less laborious. They start writing a little more. They're also a little more aware of their audience. And so what we have on this paper is, in the sun, it was bright. In the dark, it was black. It works in the sun. And so a child at this stage, they can spell words with chunks. They can remember that an OG says og, and a AT says at, ING says ing, and then use that when they hear it in words. They know a lot more words that they don't have to think really hard about how to spell and write. They're really working on their long vowels, such as AI, AY, or A consonant E, and ambiguous vowels like OI and OY for the OI sound, or AU for the ah sound. And so the vowels are what they really start concentrating on, and they can now write for a little longer time with a few more words correct. And so an intermediate writer is starting to get towards mastery, but they still have words that they're working on. Most of their single syllable words are going to be correct. And because they're working so much on vowels, because vowels are so hard in our language, you will see a lot of times silent E thrown in the middle of a word because they know it goes somewhere, but they're not sure where. And they may just stick a silent E in a lot of words that don't need it because they're working on that and trying to figure out where to do it. These kids also can start to use graphic organizers or start organizing their writing. They can start making lists or creating an organization system so that they can write and have a structure to their writing. And so here's an example of an intermediate writer, and this child can revise and edit, but they're still going to need some adult help doing that. Notice how much more is on the page here. This child has written quite an extensive amount for a story, And as I said earlier, most of their single syllable words are correct until they get to writing too fast or in haste, and then they might make some mistakes. And finally is what we want all of our children to become are advanced writers. And this is when they can write with a little more fluent writing. So they can write without having to think about every single word that they're writing down, or to think about how do I start my sentence or end my sentence. They're also there because reading and writing are reciprocal. Their reading has become stronger. So therefore they have that reading background to help support their writing. They know those basic rules. They know you begin with a capital and you need some kind of punctuation. They know when to use quotations for the most part, and question marks and things like that. They're now working on trying to write more complex ideas, more complex sentences, and to work on writing for different audiences. The other thing that they start working on now is working on different types or genres, such as writing persuasive or argumentative type of writing versus a creative writing story. And so we have 4 basic recommendations for how to help our kids with their writing. The first one we're going to talk about is student interest. The second one is variation of writing tasks, how to use tools to aid writing, and finally to recommend that we use formative assessment to help inform our instruction with our students. So this is our first little kiddo. This is Noah, and Noah loved black holes. But Noah also would not participate in writing tasks when we were working with him. He refused. He would walk around the room. He would talk with adults. He would do anything he could except to write. It wasn't until we figured out that he loved black holes. And as soon as we told him he could write about black holes in his writing journal, he had black holes all over that journal. Almost every page was full of black holes. And then when we would ask him about it, he would talk at length about his black holes and what he knew. And he had so much knowledge about this. And so once we gave him time to write about what he wanted, he really took that and ran with it and was able to write a lot. The next thing we wanted to talk about, this is in our article that will give you a QR code, but these are some ideas on ways to write differently so that we're not just writing a paragraph or writing a story. One of the easiest things to do with our kids is to create a list, because a list is not as daunting as writing a paragraph. And you can write a list of shopping list or things that you like, or how many animals can you think of? How many things do we find on the playground? A checklist for what do we need to do before we go on our field trip. Those types of activities are easy to incorporate without tremendous worry from the children about writing. That list can then become something called a list group label, where you write a list or you brainstorm a list of words, and then you allow the kids to put these onto little cards or sentence strips or sticky notes, and then try to put those in groups and then think of labels for each one of those groups. And this is great because it uses a different part of our brain when we're starting to think about the concepts of what these words mean and vocabulary and how can we organize these. And then to help with creative writing are things such as a story frame or storyboard, thinking almost like a comic strip type of story where you can think about the sequence of the story. And this helps kids get their writing in order and make sure that they have the right parts. And thinking about comic stories to help children with dialogue and how to write speech. If you give them activities where they're writing speech or thought bubbles, this helps us to think about how do we speak and how do we talk and how do we write that. And then some different things are have children create maps, because labeling maps is a different type of writing. Have children interview others. They could be peers, they could be adults, they could be older children, younger children, and they can create the questions and then write about the interviews and what they find out about people. And then the final one is when you're writing with graphs, it's also a different type of writing. And so they can create the graphs, which incorporates some math and science skills, but also then add the writing to it and then write about the graphs. And the final thing we want to say is to make sure that you have writing journals in all of your in all of your content areas. And so here we have just a few of the tools that you can use with writing. We had a child that really needed the alphabet strip to help him do his sounds. And he was still working on trying to figure out which letter was it to begin his words with. And so he used his alphabet strip and he got very good at pulling it out when he needed it. And a soundboard would be a very similar Words Are Way soundboard or from any of your programs where it gives the children those little clues to help them figure out the sounds. In the middle, we have a great weather vocabulary concept map. And if you worked on this together or in small groups or individually, it provides the children with the vocabulary that they will need in order to write about this topic. And so if you notice how many great words are there for weather, children can then use that to write their informational text or to write everything they've learned about weather, or however you want to go with it, even to do a creative writing about writing a weather forecast. And so that tool can be used in many different respects. And finally, any kind of graphic organizers, which a concept map could be considered a graphic organizer. We have a T-chart showing the contrast between summer and winter, which could then lead to a writing activity. And the last one, the very small one, is just a story organizer where it has like the beginning, the middle, and the end, and important details. And the last thing to look at, this is one of our children's writing from the intermediate stage. And there's so many things going on in this child's writing, so many great things. It has a great beginning, it has a middle and an end. But then when you look at some of the words, you notice that space might be something that I could look at and do something with instructionally. I have a feeling this child knows the long A, but wrote an E in haste. But we can work on, let's talk about the different sounds for the S sound. C says it before an E. You used an S. And so this becomes something for instruction. The same thing with scary. Scary is spelled 3 different ways. And so I think it comes from not knowing exactly how to spell that Y sound at the end. Is it EY? Is it Y? Also comes from rushing, and then the AR has it reversed a couple of times. So making sure the child is hearing the sounds in the word and then writing them. This child also needs some help with sentence structure. How can we vary our sentences? How can we make some of them stronger? How can we not have run-ons or have incomplete sentences? And so making sure that you help the child and have mini lessons where you're helping them with their writing as the sentences are, how the sentences are structured within the writing. And then finally, teaching kids to do proofreading. This child probably knows how to spell first, fun, and soap, but then didn't proof and find that those needed to be correct. And so children need to learn to proofread and to do their own editing. And so here is the QR code if you wanted to get a copy of our article that was called The Writing Continuum, Examining Primary Age Students' Writing, which was published in the Journal of Literacy Innovation. We'll also put the link to this slideshow at the very end of this presentation.
Okay, do we think that's enough time to move on to the next slide? Like Barb said, if you can't get your phone quickly enough, we'll have another QR code at the end. Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple creative writing exercises for you and your students, because as Paul said earlier, I'm very passionate about supporting teachers and students as writers and working with teachers as writing instructors. So it's both of those things that are really important. We as educators need to have positive, express positive thoughts when it comes to writing and see ourselves as writers so that we can encourage our students with their writing and to see themselves as writers. So I wanted to share with you a little something called poem sketching, and I'm going to drop a handout in the chat at the end. Let's see. I'm going to drop a handout in the chat at the end, but poem sketching is a technique that is used where you're combining words into sentences that feel like poems. So you might be wondering, what the heck does that mean? So basically what you would do is you would select a word group of 4, and I'm going to share that with you on the handout. but 1 or 2 word groups of 4, and then you use those 4 words to write 3 or more sentences in which all word groups are included. We're not trying to rhyme at this point. We generally don't rhyme our sentences, so that's not necessary here. But you might choose to recombine word groups or change the form of words as needed. So here's an example that shows what the word group would be. In this case, it is pond, mirror, shadows, and copy. So then this student wrote, "The water of the village pond lies still, smooth as glass. It mirrors cypress and cattails along its rim. I wonder, will it copy also shadows of my memories?" And so they took these 4 words as their base to create this really beautiful and impressive poem. And so I feel like maybe, Barb, for the sake of time, we should move on to our next exercise, because everybody's going to get the handout of this. Do you think that's okay? Okay. So like I said, you're going to get a handout with these and other word groups. If we had more time, we would love to do this, but basically you would be able to select any of these word groups and then create those 3 sentences to create your own poem sketch. And then just some other notes for revising and finalizing. Once you've created those 3 sentences, including your 4 words, you would want to condense the lines by removing unnecessary words. Helps to make the line more compact, and it helps it to feel more like poetry, like we were talking about, these sentences that feel like poetry. We want to have descriptive verbs and nouns, bring in similes and metaphors, and then add a title to make those sentences really feel like that poem. And so I know we went through that fairly quickly, but we wanted to have time to ask you to move about a little bit, maybe stretch your legs, because we're going to be creating our own still lifes. And like I said, we're revisiting that idea of the memoir we wrote at the beginning of the session. So a still life is something that we see in art. I always imagine bowls of fruit, though it can be any number of things. I don't know why that always comes to my brain. But it's a painting or a photograph or an image of some sort of inanimate objects that are gathered together. And then we've already written a memoir, so we know a memoir is telling a story about a person, telling us about who they are. So we're going to combine those 2 things today. And so your task, like I said, we're going to encourage you to get up and move around a little bit, is to collect some items. It says from around your house. If you're at the office, you can collect some items from your office. You might dig in your bag if you're like me and you carry a million things with you. Or maybe you just go through your phone and look at your camera roll and combine some photos. But we want you to collect some items that represent who you are or signify something important about you or show us a glimpse of who you are. And so we want you to gather these items together and take a picture of these, and that is going to serve as your still life. Also, we would love you to take your photo and drop it in the chat, and if anybody wants to share a little bit about that, that would be fantastic as well. So that is going to be your task. We're going to give you a few minutes to actually get up and go do that. But before you go, I just wanted to share with you my still life as an idea. So you'll see some things I included: a coffee mug, a picture of my cats, a picture of my family, some of my favorite books, a journal that I was given, a candle. And then underneath, I have, you can't quite tell, but it's a bunch of cards that people have sent me, because I always keep the cards that people give me. So I brought all of these things together. And I think just from looking at these different components that are included in my still life, you kind of get a sense of a little bit about me, who I am, what's important to me, maybe what I enjoy doing. And so, like we said, we're going to encourage you to take some time. And I see that Barb has already dropped her still life in the chat. So I'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes to go ahead and work on compiling that. And like I said, we would love for you to drop that in the chat and share it with us. I think the first time that I did this exercise, it was on Zoom, and I was frantically running around my house trying to gather things within the time limit. So I'm not trying to pressure anybody. I'm sure whatever you bring together for your still life will be fantastic. And if you just hear me in the background as you're frantically running around trying to compile your still life, that's fine too.
And mine sent a little early. As soon as I dropped it in there, it went. So I apologize for that.
Oh, I know. That's why I paused the screen sharing, because I was opening your still life. And so paused screen sharing, but I wanted to see what you dropped in the chat. So I really liked it. I thought, oh yes, that's very Barb. I can picture some things that I know about her to be true and totally see that in her still life, which is the point. So that's great. Okay, and we'll take about another minute and a half. If you can't get everything all at once, even just a couple of things would be great. I see Paul just dropped his in the chat. Can't wait to see Paul's still life. The what you carry in your bag prompt. Yes, I joke that I have a Mary Poppins bag. Christina, if you have an iPhone and a Mac computer, you can airdrop the photo from your phone to your computer and then pull it into the chat. Otherwise, emailing it to yourself would be my second recommendation. Barb, do you have any other suggestions?
I think that's what I would recommend too. Yep.
So airdrop if you have Apple devices, if not, emailing it to yourself. Okay, so that was our time. If anybody wants to drop their still life in the chat, that would be great. And if you didn't get a chance to finish everything, or you're not able to drop it in the chat for whatever reason, if anybody wants to just share what they want to include in their still life, Barb, would you like to share your kind of explain your images real quick?
Sure. My image was taken here at work, so that's why Paul and I have the same the same carpet. Photos of family, the clock, because the clock sits by my door and it has read all over it, but I'm always have to worry about time. Of course, I love books. I have a variety of books there. I forget to eat sometimes, so I always have bars and fruit here or something so that I can eat. Little fidgets. And then what I ended up writing was something about being lost, because if you notice, both my mugs have a little blue thing on it that has my cell phone number on it. And then I noticed my glasses. My husband says I always lose my glasses. So I tend to leave things all over, but I never lose them for good. So I always find them. And that was what kind of prompted my 6-word story about the picture that I had done. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Do we have anybody else who would like to share, whether, like I said, whether it's sharing your actual image or maybe just telling us what you included? I see Paul. I'm not going to put you on the spot and make you talk, but I just wanted to share because he did put it in the chat. So
Yeah,
just in case anybody wasn't able to open his photo.
Yeah, you're good, Michelle. It's funny, I had actually just clicked on mute
Oh, perfect.
right when you said my name. Like I put in the chat, which I think you read to us already, I just looked in my bag. I'm in my office at the moment also, so there are too many options if I look all around me. But just thinking about the stuff that I carry literally every day and then forget that's there. So I found some notes about, home buying. I found notes from going to a financial planning meeting with a family member. I made a point to cover their name, but so yeah, just thinking about different relational things. There's I forget which fast food restaurant it was, but one of my kids got who's elementary age got like this little pack of Uno cards with a meal at a fast food restaurant. So that's in my bag because you never know when you're going to need an emergency game. And then there's like some of the academic stuff, like a textbook and a book that I checked out from the library 9 months ago and haven't opened yet, and those types of things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so this is actually thinking back to the 6-word memoir that you all wrote earlier in our session. This is something that, as part of the National Writing Project of Acadiana, when we had our first student writing camp over Zoom in the summer of 2020, now this was with high school age students, we had them create their own still life memoir by collecting things and taking a photo. But Barb and I were talking, and we think that this would be great for elementary age students as well, whether they are, at their homes collecting things, taking a photo, because so much, we have so many avenues for technology at this point. Maybe parents are able to share these via email or GroupMe, things like that with the child's teacher, for this to be able to be brought into the classroom and then used as a jumping off point for writing. Because again, we're bringing in these different things that really tell a story without having to have a ton of words on the page. Christina says they have a pair of binoculars, sneakers, and a favorite children's book. So I like that a lot. Are you a bird watcher by any chance? I'm curious because of the binoculars.
Let's see. Can you hear me speak?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I'm a birder and I love hiking and I love reading books to our grandchildren.
Awesome. So I feel like even though we can't actually see your still life right now, just knowing that you have binoculars there, I said, I wonder if she's a birder. So that told me a little bit about you, right? And then that could be this starting point for some really interesting conversation and writing. And so, did I go backwards? Oh, so this is what our, we don't have time for it today, but this would be the writing that could accompany the still life. So the next step, extension challenge. And of course, for whatever age your students are, you can modify this to be what's appropriate for them. But based on the still life you created, you could then expand your 6-word memoir into an exactly 100-word memoir. And this can be written in sentence and paragraph format, or maybe you want to get a little bit more creative and go more of a poetry route. And again, this is something that I've done with high school students in a Zoom setting. And I went ahead and wrote this poem called Dreamer with a K. I did not follow my own directions. It is 108 words, I have to admit. I told Barb I didn't follow my own directions. It wasn't 100 words. She said, how many words is it? So I looked it up. But you'll see that I took this idea of being a professional dreamer. That was a journal that my aunt gifted to me. People are constantly giving me journals because I enjoy writing. And then I have this candle that was called Wonderlust Dream. And I tend to be a daydreamer. And so, but then my last name is Kramer, but it's spelled like dreamer with a K. And so that's where this poem was inspired by. And so we encourage you all to take some time and to use your still life memoir to write something to go along with it, to where those pieces kind of speak with one another. And then, like Barb said earlier, we have, we're going to share our QR code with you for this presentation. And so I would just wanted to include all these resources. So don't worry about getting the links right now. You'll be able to get them through the QR code at the end. And this is for the 6-word stories and for the 100-word memoir. All right, and then just a couple of tools we want to, writing strategies for any class, and I'll go through these fairly quickly. But clustering is a great resource to help students organize ideas and details. When you're using this approach to writing to learn, you have your circle in the center of the paper with the main topic, and then you branch off from there with different ideas and details that stem from the center. This can be great when students are recording notes about a topic, or maybe just brainstorming ideas for a creative writing task. We also have a semantic feature analysis. I really love this strategy. And I'll also say that these are great for K through 12. The strategies we chose really can be used across the age ranges. But this is a grid used to organize information and examine characteristics of different topics. So you create a grid, and I'm actually going to go to the next slide because I think looking at a picture is sometimes a little easier. But you have a column going down, a column going across, and then you mark the grid to identify different information. So you can see the code here is a plus for yes, a minus for no, and a question mark for don't know. So in this example, we can see that the English arrived in the 1600s, the 1700s. They came for religious freedom, and so on and so forth. The benefit of creating a chart like this is that we're able to look at a lot of information in a really manageable way and then make comparisons across these different elements. And then a double entry journal is an approach to note-taking that includes student notes and their thinking about the notes. And that's what I really like about it, because it's not just I'm copying what the textbook says or what my teacher's telling me, or maybe what's on a PowerPoint, but I'm including my thinking as well. And so I think of the left side as the notes and quotes. So that's the stuff the students are already getting. But then the right side is questions and reflections. And that's really important. So what is my thinking about this content, or what questions do I have about this? And it's great for taking notes as well as responding to literature. Okay, and I'll turn it back over to Barb.
All right. So before we even ask these questions, we wanted to know if anybody had any questions for us, anything you need clarified, or anything you would like to know a little bit more about. All right. And if not, then there's 2 prompts here. How have you used writing to encourage learning with your students if you're currently in a classroom? And even what suggestions you have for teachers in the same grade or content area? What would you give them as an idea for using writing? And so you can either unmute and tell us some of these, or you can put it in the chat. We're a quiet bunch today. I would say have your kids write at any time. Those spare moments when there's transitioning between one activity and another, kids can have a writing journal and they can be working on that and they can add things to it. Make writing a priority within the class and within all your content areas.
Ooh, Paul just gave us a good idea in the chat, which goes right along with what you were saying about writing in the content areas, which is using Raft for a history or social studies classroom. So if I remember, that's role, audience, format, topic.
Yes.
I believe. Okay. It's been a little minute since I've used Raft, but I used to use that in my secondary English class, particularly when we were looking at historical documents, because I taught American literature.
Oh, good. Evelyn has a suggestion. List poems with the topic being discussed.
Okay.
That's a great idea. So writing a list poem, right? Am I reading that right?
I think so. And it also makes me think of acrostic poems as well, that students can create, where you have the word going down and then descriptors going across that relate back to that main topic.
Mm-hmm. And you could start even with their name, doing an acrostic poem with their name.
Absolutely.
About themselves. And I know, Paul, we're probably getting close to time. On the next slide, I think we have the QR code. Is that correct, Michelle?
Oh, yes.
Yep.
So thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you being here. I know it's the end of the day, the end of the semester or school year. And so we really appreciate it. Barb and I both love writing and writing instruction. We come from different ranges of grade levels, but this is something that we really enjoyed working with together. And so we were glad to be able to do this. Thanks for inviting me, Barb.
Yes, thank you for coming, Michelle. And as Michelle said, we both are firm believers in everybody needs to be writing a lot. And that's how we get better at writing, is by practicing it.
And having that attitude that we are all writers.
Yes.
Well, before I let you go, I started writing a comment in the chat, and then I thought, I heard my name, so I'm just going to appear. But I love I appreciate how you invested some time in the curation, the capturing of a still shot from life, because I live with a kindergartner. And so it's been fun over the last 9 months to watch his literacy, emerge. But he's full of creative storytelling, and a lot of that comes with a lot of sound effects and movement whenever possible. But being able to tell a story through capturing an image, through curating an image, and then talking about it makes a lot of sense to me from what I am observing with my son. And so adding sort of that multimedia, whether it's as the vehicle for the storytelling or as a prompt for further writing, it sounds very powerful. So I appreciate you introducing us to that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. I do want to offer that we can also, for the folks who signed up for the webinar, including, I know that there's some folks who aren't live with us, we'll also be happy to send out this link if you'd like us to, along with the recording, which is our standard practice.
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Okay, very good.
Oh, okay.
And for the rest of folks, I just want to end with 2 announcements. I do have our graduate teacher education program in the chat there, emu.edu/GTE. So if you want to continue the conversation, if you're looking for some further learning opportunities for yourself as an educator, we'd love to work with you, hear about what goals you have. And I also, specific to this hour together, can offer a professional learning certificate. If you want to email my colleague, and I'll put her name, Cara, in her email, in the chat. Feel free to reach out to Cara, and she can provide documentation of the professional learning that you've engaged in today. So on that note, I want to thank once again Michelle and Barbara for leading us, for sharing from your expertise and your experience, and for making this such an interactive space. Even with the recording, it's going to be awesome that there's so many, we can just press pause and engage in these activities and share them in whatever context we're in. So I highly recommend that both of you use this resource that you've just invested in your own classes. Word to the wise. So
I was going to say, now folks can take as much time as they want to create their still life. They don't have to have the pressure of the clock. So
exactly. Good point. All right. Well, thank you all to each person who logged on today, and blessings as you finish out your school year.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.